Hello, welcome back. It's Paleo Baking Live. Ho, ho, ho. We are on the countdown to Christmas. And today I want to show you a delicious pecan roll that you will be tempted to share, maybe not share, with your friends, that it's gluten, grain-free, and dairy-free. I think I've perfected this recipe. It's lots of fun. And it's very simple to put together. So let's get started. First, I want to show you the dry ingredients. I already have them prepared here, and we've got old Bessie out again today. I've got almond flour, 1 cup, 2 cups of tapioca flour, and some coconut flour, the typical mix. And I'm just aerating it and making sure there are no lumps with the whisk. And then I'm going to add the leavening. So this is 1 tablespoon of baking powder and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. It's pink Himalayan salt, so I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little pink in there. You can also, if you're trying to keep it grain-free, I make my own baking powder with cream of tartar. So that would be 2 teaspoons of baking soda and 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. So that's going in. Since I already had my baking powder mixed, I'm just adding the tablespoon of baking powder. And sorry if I step off and I'm going in and out today. Last week my little tracking device sort of decided to go on strike, so we have a new one on order. Okay, so that's all blended together. And I'm gonna add the dry into the mixer first this time. And this helps keep the dough short. And even though this doesn't have any gluten, we don't want the dough to get really super tight. So this is sort of a backwards method from the creaming method. Okay, so that's gone into the mixer. I'm gonna put it on the stand. You can do this by hand if you don't have a mixer. You can use a hand mixer if you like. And I'm just gonna put this on low, of course, because we don't want a dust explosion. And I see some people here with me today, so let me get into my own event over here and find out what's happening. Here we are. So while that's mixing, I've already melted, and it doesn't have to mix a long time. I just want to get it blended. I've already melted some shortening, the same palm shortening that I've been using in the other recipes, along with some water. And I just do it on low heat in the microwave because I don't want it to be so hot that it's going to cook the eggs. Now to that, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar and 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And that's all the sweetener we need for this. Well, we are gonna make a schmear, so there'll be a little more sweetness. But we want this to be kind of a lean dough, which means not with a lot of super heavy fats in it. And I want to say hello to Messina and to Paige, who are watching today. Thanks for joining me. So this is just going to go right into the dry. So that's the melted palm shortening and the water, the apple cider vinegar, and the maple syrup. And I don't know if you can hear it, but it's starting to sound a little slower, and it's sort of going, on its own to blend together. This is kind of a wet dough. We have to let it sit in the fridge for a little bit before we roll it out, but I already have 1 cup to show you. Let me just take this off so you can kind of see how it's coming together right now. So you can see it's already kind of coming together, but still a little crumbly. So we're gonna put this back on and we'll add the eggs. And to the eggs, I have added 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So that's gonna go in, again on slow. And I know this seems a little backwards, but it really does work well for a short dough like this. I'm just gonna scrape that. I did mix the eggs a little bit so they're not going in whole. They've been beaten. This keeps saying comments off. I'm sorry if I'm not answering your questions. So now this is very wet looking. I'm going to scrape it down. And I'm just making sure that it's off the paddles, those little openings in the paddle, and always go underneath the paddle where it comes in contact with the bottom of the bowl. Sometimes it doesn't always mix in, and then you take everything out of the bowl and you've got a little bit of dry mix left in there. Now the last thing I'm adding is just a little bit of coconut flour. It's an additional 1/4 cup. It helps to bring the dough together, and I don't know why it works, but it just works to add that little bit in at the last minute. So we're gonna do it that way. And I wanna show you how this dough, just even when it's right out of the mixer, still has a little stickiness. So it's not ready to be rolled out yet, but you'll see it already pulls together. So it's a little wet, but that's what keeps it tender. And this is done. So let me move my big gal out of the way here. And I'll show you how this dough looks. Now I'm just gonna wrap it in plastic wrap. Let me grab my plastic wrap. Not enough room on the counter for everything. And I'm just gonna take this out of the bowl with my spatula. Make sure this paddle is completely cleaned off, and this dough is just perfect. So simple. I mean, was that so easy? And I'm just collecting it all from around the sides. I'm gonna put it right on this plastic wrap. And I want you to see when I touch it, I've probably told this story before. I worked for an Italian baker in an Italian restaurant, and if you sent a bowl to the dish tank with a little bit of extra, he'd bring it back and say, that's another 50 cents, and make you clean it out. So I've gotten really good at making sure there's nothing left in the bowl, or Nick would yell at me. So you can see when I touch it, it doesn't stick to my hands. I mean, hardly at all. It's a little wet, but it isn't gonna be so sticky that you can't handle it, but I still like to refrigerate it for about half an hour, maybe an hour. It's not the kind of thing you can refrigerate overnight, but I am gonna test freezing it. And I just like to make sure that the plastic wrap is tight all the way around and there's no air, just in case it starts to get a skin. And that's my dough, and it'll be ready in about a half an hour to roll out. But I already have some ready to show you, so I'll be right back. Okay, so in the essence of time, I wanted to make sure that I had things sort of already portioned out and ready to go. So what I've done is, I don't understand why this isn't working. I'm so sorry. I see comments from across the screen and I can't read them. Sorry. So let's talk about the schmear. The schmear is the most ideal and most important part of any pecan roll or cinnamon roll. By the way, you don't have to use pecans if you don't want. You can definitely just use the cinnamon schmear in the center and then leave the nuts off, or maybe even use the royal icing that I used last week on the gingerbread cookies as a frosting. Try mixing it with coconut milk instead of water, or the egg white, and you would have a nice dairy-free frosting to put on top of the on top of the finished cinnamon rolls. But I really like the pecans. I think they say holiday, and I love the crunch with this nice tender dough. So let me get the ingredients for the schmear, and I'll show you how that goes together. What I have here is a half a cup of the palm shortening, already measured out. And I'm just gonna put that into this bowl, and it's soft. Make sure I get it all completely out of there. And then I'm going to add to that 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. Just 2 level teaspoons. And 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. So this is the sweetener that we're adding. So just this and the other maple syrup in the dough is really all the sweetener we need. And then because this shortening is soft, I can just mash it together with the spatula. And it comes together very easily, and it's super simple to handle. Now, if at this point you had another flavoring that you like, if you wanted to do the pumpkin pie spice instead of just straight up cinnamon, so you had the addition of the nutmeg and the clove, that would be delicious. If you really like pecans and you want to put the pecans into the dough when we roll it up along with the topping, then you can do that. I always recommend maybe doing 1.5 times the schmear recipe, because I like to put it into the bottom of the cupcake mold. If you don't have cupcake pans, you can certainly pan these up into a baking dish and let them, you know, bake together and then do a pull apart kind of thing. But I like to do individual ones. So now this is all mixed. That's the schmear. And I already have some pecans chopped here. And we'll use those on the top, which is really basically the bottom. So here's the dough. I had half of it. I split it in half when I made it earlier. So I have half already baked off, and I'll show you those in a bit. And this is the other half. This recipe yields 12, so I'll show you 6. And I'm just gonna dust the counter with a little tapioca flour. Just enough to create a barrier between the dough and the counter. This is one of the reasons I love my wooden countertops. Get these guys out of the way. And again, just very gently, you're trying to roll into, and it breaks, so that's no big deal, just shove it back together. You're trying to roll it into a rectangle, an even rectangle, and you want it to be the same thickness on all sides. And I'm just picking up some more of that tapioca flour, and I'm gonna dust the top a little bit as well and turn it over so we can keep going. And I'm just pinching it together where it sort of came apart. And you wanna get this to about 1/4 inch thick. Don't go super thin, because then it won't really, now that was my fault. It won't really puff a lot in the oven if you go too thin, sorry. I'm just gonna use my offset spatula to get under it now that I've got it a little bigger. This is gonna go so fast, you guys, you'll see. And then I'm just squaring it up a little bit because I want to make sure that when I roll it, we don't have any uneven ends or sides. And that looks really good. Just run the spatula under it one more time to make sure it's not stuck. And it is stuck a little bit, but that's okay. Now we're going to prepare the muffin pan. First, I'm just gonna hit it with some ghee spray. Again, I don't like to use canola oil or any of those processed oils. And because I'm only making 6, I'm using the center 6 muffin tins because I wanna make sure that they bake evenly. So we're gonna leave those ends off. And then I'm just gonna take a little dollop of the schmear, just that much, and drop it down into the center. When it bakes, it'll spread. So I'm gonna do that with all 6. I'm grabbing enough for 2 at a time. See, it doesn't take much. And 2 more. This is why I like to have extra schmear, because if you really want to coat these and make them nice and ooey gooey on the top, it's nice to have a little extra. So that's that. And now I'm just going to take the rest of this schmear and put it right in the center of this dough. And I'll use my spatula to make it nice and even. And I go almost to the edge on every side except for one. One edge, try and keep clean, because when you roll the dough, you want that to be your outside edge where it seals, and you don't want it to get too gooey so that it melts out and makes a mess of your pan. But you also want to make sure that everybody gets a good, generous bite of this schmear. So you want to make sure it's nice and even. And you can see that makes a great coating. Just going to wash my hands real quick and figure out why I can't see your comments. I have my iPad over here so I can talk to you, and it's not cooperating today. Okay, so back to this. Oh, I shouldn't have thrown that in there. We're gonna use this spatula to get these lifted. And yes, I am showing you how to make these because these are so delicious on Christmas Day. Who doesn't love a good cinnamon roll? And I'm just making sure that they're not stuck. And I'm gonna start rolling from this side. Roll it tight, like a burrito or a cigar. Very carefully. Use your spatula if you need to give the dough a little help lifting it off the counter. I like to use the flour as a barrier, but I don't like to put so much flour that when it bakes, it makes it kind of cakey and gummy. We don't want that texture. So you can see I'm just very gently rolling it up. And trying to make sure that it lifts off the counter. And now I just go back and forth a little bit to make sure that that edge right there is sealed. And that's it. I like to square up the ends. And now I'm gonna cut it into 6 because we have 6 muffin tins. So I'm gonna go right down the center. So now it's cut in half, and then I'll cut each half into thirds. And I'm just eyeballing it. And those look about right. You don't need to use a serrated knife. Just make sure it's nice and sharp and goes all the way through. And now they're all cut. And you can see they have that nice pinwheel in the center. So I'm gonna put this back, and because I like the pecans on the top, I'm going to put about a tablespoon or so, maybe a little more, of these chopped pecans into each muffin cup. And that's in there with the schmear that I put in earlier. And I'm just making sure that they're spread around. You can use a whole pecan. You could decorate and use like 3 whole pecans so that when you invert them, they have a nice top. These are basically upside down cakes, right? So now I'm just gonna take each one of these pinwheels, each one of these rolls, and put it into the pan and give it a little press so that it rounds out, and it'll spread a little bit when it bakes in the pan. And you do want to make sure that that edge is sealed so when you push on it, it doesn't come apart. Now, you could probably refrigerate these at this point and bake them off in the morning. I find they're so easy and don't take so much time that I can get them all done in one swoop. But if you want to save yourself a little time on Christmas morning, maybe make them the day before and then pop them into the oven on Christmas morning. They're perfect for the coffee and egg frittata or whatever else you're making for Christmas. So that's all of the rolls in the pan, and these will go in the oven for 15 minutes. I like to set it for 8, rotate the pan, you know, just to make sure they're all cooked evenly, and then another 7. And that's with my oven set, preheated at 350 degrees. I'm gonna put these in the oven and I'll bring back what they look like finished. So here we are, all done. I baked these off a little earlier, and I have a sheet pan with some parchment paper. You can see how they came out. That one isn't cracked. I actually took a little bite. You think I'm gonna wait for you guys? Now, because we sprayed the pan and because we put the schmear and the pecans in the bottom, they should not stick. If you bake them and then you wanna rewarm them just a little bit to make sure that anything that solidified is nice and melty so they slide right out, go ahead and do that. These, I believe, are gonna pop right out, and they did. So there you have a beautiful pecan roll with that delicious pecan topping. You could still drizzle these with icing if you like too. I'm trying to minimize the amount of sugar. I think they're sweet enough just like this. But they're tender, the dough is flaky. You get that nice pinwheel effect in the center, and they're delicious. And you have to eat them all in one day because they really are not any good the next day. Now I just need a cup of coffee. So that's it. Simple, delish, and nutrish, because we're using non-grain flours, we're not using dairy, we're using palm shortening that's full of healthy ingredients, and pecans, any nuts you can use are just gonna give you that much more nutrition. They're full of zinc and magnesium. So power up even your sweet treats. I wanted to let you know that tomorrow and Saturday, I will be doing live Zoom Q&A about Whole30. Whole30 January group will be starting on January 4th. We'll do about 5 days before that of prep. So if you have any questions, if you want to learn more about Whole30, send me a DM and I'll send you the link for either Thursday at 4 o'clock or Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. I hope you can join me. I think January is a perfect time to do a reset, get our bodies back in balance, improve our gut health, especially with the pandemic. You know, there's nothing wrong with making sure our immune systems are as optimal as possible. And also, finally, Chefs Against Hunger is feeding at Christian Service Center every Wednesday in December. I'll be going down there again tonight. Please go to the chefsagainsthunger.org website if you'd like to support us. I won't see you again until the week between Christmas and New Year when we'll start our Whole30 prep. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, however you celebrate. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. Thanks, see you soon.